Hi, welcome to the XYChromies, Confidently Uncertain, a show where two Army vets turned renewable energy engineers discuss veteran issues, engineering, history, geopolitics, science, and everything in between. I'm your host, Pearson Guest, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Richard Ellis. How's it going today, Richard?
Happy Memorial Day Eve to you.
Cheers to all of our fallen brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
May your blood not have been wasted in vain. Oh, that'll be my salute to you.
Wow, heavy. Heavy, man.
I don't know why it just came out.
Does anyone so Veterans Day and Memorial Day are oftentimes confused in many people's minds.
Always. My mom
And
always gleefully texts me, "Oh, thank you for your service," and blah, 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 right, usually for this one. I'm always like, that's
yeah.
the next one. I was like, you can do that when I'm dead. That's the joke I always make with her, but
And then
she hates that joke, as all mothers would.
We often forget why we have a Labor Day weekend in September.
Yeah.
And our country doesn't. I'm gonna. There's a lot to criticize our nation for. There's plenty. We have lots to answer to, but culturally, we don't really make much of a deal about either D-Day or Victory in Europe Day, and we don't really make a like a we don't really take a moment to be silent for December 7th, which is the attack on Pearl Harbor Day.
Yeah.
And we don't. I can't remember what day the armistice was signed in Tokyo Bay because it's not enough of our culture. That day fell out of my head.
Yeah.
Date must have been in August, maybe September.
I was just thinking, well, didn't Trump erase Veterans Day this year already? Wasn't that one of his things that he did where he changed the name to like Victory Day or some shit like that? Anyways, this is episode 49. Should probably get that out of the way real quick. It's been a while. Me and Richard are eager to jump into discussions because we had felt like a month-long hiatus, but I think we haven't chatted for 2 weeks. Maybe it's because we had a Mother's Day break before that as well. So we've had a couple breaks. And so how have things been going for you? While I know you're in the throes of finals times and final projects and all of that hoopla at OIT.
Yeah, how do you reduce that one down to doing fine?
They call that
our,
I just read a term. Sorry, they call that like normalizing a crisis or something like that.
Yeah,
I just read an article about this where it's like to the point where people are like gaslighting you when you're like, there's a tornado out, and people are like, no, it's fine, it's fine. They're like, yeah, but it's coming right at us. No, it's fine.
Not a big deal. It's fine. I was looking around my mic as I was taping in Armistice Day, Japan. Let's see here. As well, the September surrender. So September 2nd, 1945. So
September 2nd.
I was in the right region of the year. I just wasn't sure on which day of which month it was. I'm going to answer your question here, and I'm trying to think of how to come at this because in some cases, let's celebrate. I mean, I've got a group of seniors I've been working with all year. They've brought a couple different project ideas and notions about what they want to turn in.
We're hiring, by the way. Just FYI, any of these ones who feel they're like, oh, I don't know what to do about a job. If any of them look freaked out or stuff, be like, hey, I know tons of people. They're all engineers. You can send them my way. I'm sure Billy will field them. Power, those punks are always trying to yoink half the student graduating class over there. So, but
I'm
just,
so glad you
just
mentioned
put
this
us out
because
there, by the way.
that's part of the mixed feeling that I have, which is I've worked with a group of seniors that constitutes multiple departments and multiple disciplines within those departments.
Sure.
So mechanical engineering majors, electrical engineering majors, that type of thing. And one of the EEs asked me last week. He says, "You know any you know any good internship programs I should be applying towards?" And of course, what did I say? Which was, "Oh yeah, well, your company is looking for people to apply for positions." But I said, "I'm going to keep this succinct, but we're going to enter the summer in a really difficult place for recent graduates from college because we're in the last days right now of what still feels sort of normal.
Yeah.
But the consequence of the first 100 days of the Trump administration are going to begin to play out in June, right as they graduate, right as they walk across stages all over the country and pick up their diplomas.
You mean
And
like
so,
hiring freezes? Are you thinking of hiring
yeah,
freezes due to uncertainty, the uncertainty factor? Yeah.
yeah, the uncertainty factor is part of it, but then the uncertainty factor is what you call an introductory phase for the recession that comes afterwards.
Yeah.
And so, what I hope is that I'm wrong. What I hope is that I'm sitting here talking to you about this, and in October we're like lighting a cigarette or cigar with $100 bill. We're smoking that, and we're going,
Mm.
never been more prosperous as a consequence of the American electorate voting in this wonderful administration.
See,
Pass me
and
another snifter of brandy.
I've been here. I've
But
been
I don't think that.
I've been writing articles, and you're here writing new fiction. I like it. It's far fetched. Should I say? I think you're more on the money that it's difficult to time a recession because, and I think we've discussed this before. We're always waiting for like the big crash or something, the big signifier that this is that you're in a
Right.
recession. But as we know, because we've lived through quite a few of these babies now, it's more of like a series of waves, like a
Yeah.
rolling waves. You have sectors crash, and maybe that sector doesn't directly affect your sector if you're working, and so you
Yeah.
don't feel it when big tech does a bunch of layoffs or anything, with which they have, right? One would argue that big tech has gone through the labor recession first
Hmm.
before anyone
Hmm.
else almost. Um, but these things have a way of kind of working their way through the economy.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. These tariffs. One of the funny things is we're getting the last of the shipments now that were
Right.
pre-tariff. And I
Yep.
think what you're speaking about is even though um like things have softened around the Chinese, we're like basically back to where we were before with them. Except for in a worse state somehow. Um, there's about a 3 month delay for the shipment because of what's happened already, essentially, is my understanding, or
Yep.
2 to 3 months, whatever. And then that delay on top of the increased tariffs on still Canadian supply products,
Hmm.
specifically lumber and steel, very big deals when it comes to all construction. Um, so you can imagine there'll be a slowdown in new build. Um, you know, yeah, there's a lot of little things that happen to make a recession happen. That it's not just one big event, right? I
Yep.
2008, I think it was like when Goldman went under, everyone was like, oh my gosh, right? So
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll have some Goldman moments, whatever those may be. I'm not keen on the economy enough to know like some big collapse is going to happen in some sector, but it could be the insurance companies, it could be somebody, right?
Yeah.
I think Unfuck the Republic talked about this, right? Recently, with the it wasn't the it was at the subprime market, basically. I think he talked about, and then the
So
repo market.
it's the exactly the repo market. It's the shadow market that goes on that makes it possible for every type of investment instrument to happen in the first place,
Yeah,
because that's where they go and recover that dollar that they invested to make that financial instrument work.
that's
So
right.
as you asked me that question, I was thinking like, okay, well, I've got these really talented seniors I'm working with. Um, of the groups of people that I work with in my university, you could expect that if you're in the mechanical department, you're probably going to take courses on how to use CAD. You're going to have a lot of CAD experience, and with the intent of eventually being able to design for manufacturing. But in our programs, the one that you and I are you've matriculated from, and I'm still participating in, there isn't any room for CAD in the curriculum.
Which I shall say is a huge oversight.
It
Being
is.
someone that I'd say about 33 to 45% of my
Yeah.
time is doing CAD work. And we have draft teams. One might say, oh, well, leave that up to drafters. That's not how it works in the real world. It's just not. There are draft teams. They usually do the initial build, right? Like you can set a draft team up like, hey, here's a bunch of pictures, here's the diagrams, here's what we want. But
Yeah.
after that, it's handed off. It's not like you're sending CAD drawings back and forth between India
Right.
and here, right? It's just completely inefficient. From then on, you're doing all the CAD work. And if you're not working on a big project, which a lot of projects aren't that big, you're not sending it to a draft team in India anyways. If you're just designing a couple switch gears or you're doing an upgrade to a black start
Yep.
on a dam, you're doing all the design work, And
And by you're saying you, the engineer,
you, the
you,
engineer,
the EIT.
yeah, you, the EIT, you're absolutely doing a ton of this work. That's what you're doing, and you're already working within the realm of whatever drawings the client has, right? Working in dams and hydropower specifically, you can imagine some of the drawings I'm doing CAD on hand drawn drawings that have been copied into a PDF and have
Yep.
been imported into CAD, and I have CAD
Yep.
drawings overlaid on top of it. So we're talking about, for any of you drafting nerds, if you ever look up what engineering rooms used to look like even in the 80s and 70s, it's a bunch of these huge tables. I know you've seen these pictures
Mm-hmm.
of spread out through this huge like warehouse style room. It's an office room. It's not a warehouse, but it might as well be. And you've got multiple engineers, guys like sprawled all over the tables drawing. They're drawing for hours. They're drafting. They've got
Mm-hmm.
protractors, they've got their stencils, they've got all their stuff, and they're drawing these intricately precise drawings, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing. We're doing tons of CAD. The fact that the renewable energy engineers aren't, there's just no time for it. It's rather
Yeah.
egregious. And I have to say, the renewable energy engineering degree is so physics heavy, unnecessarily physics heavy. I'm going to say this right
Mm-hmm.
now. Just it's a little much, guys. Heat transfer 1 and 2 and thermodynamics 1 and 2 and
Yep.
fluids. It's unnecessary. I'm sorry, it's not. It's too much. It should be filled with these CAD drawing, like these more practical use skills, right? In fact,
Yeah.
yeah, there's so much theory. The renewable energy engineering degree is very math heavy. Like it is just like you are
Totally.
doing, all the electronics classes, all of that stuff. It's a little much. You don't need it. It's not necessarily necessary in the modern day engineering realm. It's just, yeah, 33% of it should be CAD drafting classes, reading through, developing cut sheets, design specifications.
Yep.
There should be a code finding class, literally, where what you do is you look through code books with your respective discipline to solve problems. So basically, the teacher would ask, like, well, hey, I'm trying to size a cable for a dry type transformer, blah, blah, whatever the KV is for it. I'm on the secondary side. What size cable do I use for this? And then you'd be like, well, I sized, based on my principles of AWG, I get my number 8 or whatever. But I checked the NAC manual, and just in case, it says no, on the secondary and the transformer side, you actually have to size down the cable or size up, whatever the rule is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm misquoting it right now, but that should be a class. Like literally just, hey, you need to look where the UL codes say about this. And yes, I know it sounds boring, but holy crap, it would be very useful in the real world of engineering. Um, the code books are like your Bible. They're your reference manual. You use it all the time. If you ever have questions of like, am I doing this right? Am I going to kill somebody with the cables I'm making? Are these, you
Yeah.
go to the code book and it will reassure you whether or not you're right on track or if you're way off basis. So,
I'll circle back around to your emphasis on understanding codes, covenants, and restrictions on engineering. But I wanted to mention, and I'm sure everybody got this from the context clues, but when I talk about CAD, I'm talking about computer aided design
yes.
and the graphics, drawings, and images that are used in engineering and in manufacture or in construction to
Mm-hmm.
produce these engineering projects. And so, um,
And R&D and design out there too as well. These
yeah,
all of
totally.
this is used for that as well. Just little asterisks.
So at some point, I had to get special dispensation because, of course, I've never done college the right way. I've always done it wrong. I take too many classes and so forth. And so I took our CAD design class in 2014, and I learned enough AutoCAD to actually be um, an effective at. For example, I was tasked with updating our drawings for the building for our campus building.
Oh,
And
fun.
so I can effectively do that, and I can import blocks and edit blocks and so forth, and do the stuff that isn't just
Can you
it
create the
isn't just made
attribute
up.
blocks? That can be a pain in the ass.
Right, totally, exactly, and update all that correctly so that if someone comes along after me, they're going to say, "Who did this? A novice?" And I'm going to say, "Yeah, I only took one CAD class, but it's done well enough that for our purposes as a university, it's fine." So it was later that Autodesk came up with this Autodesk Fusion program that we used to call it Fusion 360. They changed the name, but it's a 3D modeling program, and Autodesk has like I don't know 50 different types of software. Their software suite is so large I couldn't even begin to like what most people know Autodesk for is AutoCAD, Revit, Inventor,
They make Revit
and like
too.
yeah,
Jeez, those guys. Okay, so they have the whole market cornered essentially. Because I mean,
yeah, totally.
those are the Revit and
Dassault System,
AutoCAD in the real world. Those are the two that you'll just
yeah,
see over and over again. If you're looking at single lines, at least in our field in electrical,
yeah.
like if it's not those two,
It's Dassault Systems has the everything else.
yeah,
So Dassault Systems has SolidWorks and CATIA.
yeah, and
So
no one's using SolidWorks at least in our experience. Like I'm not running any or CATIA. I have never heard of it. So, um,
CATIA is the design software that Boeing uses to design their airplanes. And say
so
what
it'd
you
be more
will,
like a vendor design, maybe specifically catered towards
yeah,
vendor and
they would
like the manufacturing sector.
totally. Well, just to stop down for a minute and nerd out on design software. So CATIA is a type of software that has everything to do with the mechanical and structural aspect of a design for like an airplane, but you can also do computational fluid dynamics and stress tests on the things that you make in the design.
Oh, that's cool.
So
So they have
CFD is
modeling.
really important. Yeah, because you can find out whether or not the design that you came up with, even if it's a beautiful design, whether or not it actually works in airframes. Computational fluid dynamics for the audience is the really strenuous math that computers perform for us to make sure that that airflow over a wing is going to work, or that the fuselage is the right shape to slide through the air cleanly, like there's not a lot of turbulence created by it. So, um, yeah, whatever it was, like 7 8 years ago, they Autodesk provided the license for Fusion free to students, free to people in academia,
I
and
remember.
you've worked with it some.
Yeah. I used my
And
one
so the
year up free and they extended it while I was in school. The second I ended school, they were like, yoink,
yeah, you
immediately.
gotta pay for this, buddy. So yeah, our students get a free license while they're enrolled in school, and you have to renew it. You have to renew it every year if you want to keep using it. So this particular academic cycle, starting in October of last year to now, I had students coming to me and saying, "Can you help us with our project?" Sure. What is your project about? They would tell me, and I would say, have you started a 3D design for this? Because what you're trying to do is impossible to do without designing first. Because you either need 2 years for runway to do this work, or you need to start designing in Fusion and get your product, because Fusion is a product design software.
Yeah.
And what our seniors are doing is essentially product design. That's they're limited. They can't really do big systems. They don't have enough time, and they're trying to take something from their notion of what it is when they start their senior year to a completed thing that they're writing about and turning in some model of it at the end of the year. Probably they've made it. They've made it in real life, IRL. They've actually built it. And so of the of the three EE and EET teams, so anybody from our department, the renewable energy program, the electrical engineering program, electrical engineering technology program. It's always a mouthful to say the technology part. I've brought them up to speed on how to design in CAD.
Yeah.
And so we've gone from zero, we've never touched it before, to that student that asked me about the internships this last week. This guy's a hot shot with this already. It's like he took to it, as you would say, a duck takes to water. It's just fantastic work with this design, and you can tell that he's doing great work because he's 3D printing everything that he's designing.
Oh, that's fun.
It's just remarkable. I'm so impressed with it.
So you
But
get to
each of the different-
that's great that 3D print. Sorry to interject. I just want to say
Yeah.
that 3D printing gets to like give you a result based on your CAD work, like a tangible result to
Yep.
kind of like, yeah, I really like that aspect. That's awesome.
Instant feedback, right?
Yeah, instant feedback.
So each of these different groups of students are doing some version of designing their own parts and products, and 3D printing those parts and products, and then having to go through the revision stages to figure out what they did incorrectly in their design that doesn't either work when they're done, or doesn't line up, or doesn't fit together, or doesn't print right.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I couldn't be more enthusiastic and thrilled for what these students are accomplishing in their senior year. The work that this cohort of students is doing, because I have 12 years of comparison,
Yeah.
is among the most sophisticated and most industry connected work that any group of seniors I've worked with up to this point has really done, because they're really dedicated to integrating the design part of the project, which was hard to do before because we're not. See, 10 minutes ago where I talked about we don't have CAD classes for these majors, and they're getting the project design cycle experience that I know that they're going to be involved with later on, depending on what they work where and what they're doing for work.
Sure.
And then what they're turning in is more sophisticated in many ways than a lot of this project work that I've encountered or helped people with or come in contact. And usually it's because they wait to come see me this week. And I go, well, it's you're turning your stuff in. You have 2 weeks left before everything has to be turned in. This is not the time to talk about what we should have been doing in November of last year.
Yeah, procurement.
And so one of the student groups in the mechanical program is actually doing that. And you might be thinking, well, why are they getting such a lower experience? Why is their experience not as high quality? Well, they're doing the design work. I'm really delighted by that. But they thought that they could really fly too close to the sun, these Icarus kids.
Oh, gosh.
And their capstone is all about solar energy. These are mechanical majors.
Okay.
Now, it's not that of course they can do a solar project. A lot of what goes into a solar project is mechanical because of the support systems and deployment systems and so forth. But guess where they got hung up? In all of the electrical related parts of this.
I was about to say the electrical portion of it. I mean,
they had no relevant background. So they had the inverse problem of the EE majors of not having any CAD design experience.
Yeah.
They had no relevant experience in how to conceptualize a project that they're going to build in electrical systems with motors and servos and control devices and limit switches and that type of thing. and then they thought to come to me in May.
Oh gosh. Oh well, I mean, in the I have to say in the real world, these kind of I feel like sometimes it's like that. That is the way the projects they lie, right?
Yeah.
Specifically, when you work in hydropower design, it really is an order of how you would plan a dam is the way that you get work when you're working on a dam, like when you're upgrading
Yeah.
something or changing on it. And that is to say that when you're designing a dam from scratch, the structural people are first because they have to design the structure for which
Right.
the mechanical and electrical uh, components are even going to be in, right? They're going to do
Yep.
the concrete, they're going to do the fishways and all of that stuff. Then comes the mechanical, right? The gear that's going to be powered by the flow of water and the
Hmm.
supporting systems along with that. And then comes us, the electricals. And we're the ones who are going to wire it up and get it power, get that power out to the utility if it needs to be, get the feeds in from the utility, yada, yada. We're going to do all of that. Get the gates electrified, get the switch gears, get the
Yeah.
MCCs full of VFDs and all kinds of cool electrical equipment. Um, but that is to say, when you're working on a project, being the electrical, when new work comes down and there's something called concrete cancer, a great term. This is where like the separation of concrete over time from
Yep.
heating and cooling expansion, it starts to crack. They call it concrete cancer. So kind of cool. So common thing happens in fishways, happens all over the place. You have to have structural come in and fix it. That it's usually conveying water or electricity or some kind of infrastructure. That all needs to be diverted and maintained business as usual while the construction's occurring. So then
Yep.
you have mechanical come in. They have to figure out which pumps that to have and yada yada, and we electrify it, right? So I'm facing projects like this. That means naturally you're the last to get the work or that the last in the decision pipeline. And a
Hmm.
lot of times you're almost the afterthought. I had as much admitted to me by one of the structural teams when I was calling to see when they had made some decisions just to make sure they didn't forget about me. And I said that. And he goes, yeah, thanks for the reminder. Do you know so and so? And he mentioned this other electrical engineer from Florida. I was like, no, we don't have a big club like that. If you knew electricals, they're the opposite of that type of thing.
Yep.
But he's like, well, yeah, anyways, so and so, we do that to him all the time. We always forget. And then we're like, oh, it's 2 days before the project's due. He's like, could you do the electrical for it? Yeah, we feel really
Right.
bad about it. And he just like laughed a little bit. And I was like, oh, haha, yeah, I'm trying to avoid that. Exactly what you just described. That's why I'm calling you right now, is so that you avoid. Anyways, that is to say that not by choice, a lot of times you're flung into the fire
Yeah.
where you have 2 weeks to put together 30% design or whatever, and you're
Yep.
scrambling. Um, it's just the nature of the beast, or the clients are always changing their mind on a couple things, and they might
Hmm.
seem like simple, mundane decision changes to them, right? Oh, well, maybe we want two generators, not one, or maybe we only want one. Um, but you're fundamentally having to change the entire design because of maybe a couple decisions that they keep flip flopping or waffling on, right? And that could be weeks of work that just suddenly appears. Um, so these students are just practice. Procrastination is
Yeah.
just practice for the real world because it
It
happens in
is.
business all the time.
Yeah. They all were abashed by their realization of how late this all came in. And so when I was consulting with them, I said, all right, well, um, I got to tell you, they I consulted with them a couple of weeks ago, and I said, well, you're going to need a DC electric motor. It's got to run off of 12 volts. And I brought them a 12-volt solar panel system that I had designed for display and presentation and teaching.
Okay.
So it has the complete system in it with a 12-volt battery. I said, since you have that system, I would just use a 12-volt DC motor, and you can design around that.
Yeah.
And we had to have a talk about what relays were. That was new to them. A new topic idea was a relay. So relays and contactors allow a microcontroller to control really large voltages and current. Like You can't
Hmm.
put those big signals through a small microcontroller. So this is the similar case. You got to use a relay to control this larger signal. And we they came and found me this week and said something's wrong with our motor. I said, "Oh, really?" They said, "Yeah, it only turns one direction." I said, "You got a DC motor, right?" They said, "Yeah, it's it's locked up. It won't go the other way." I said, "Okay, let me have a look at it." And
It's locked rotor. It
no,
sounds like I'm. Is surge happening right now? Inrush current?
no. This is the height of ignorance about electrical things. Because our audience, there's 5 people in our audience right now who are yelling at their YouTube screen and saying they just need to reverse polarity, and they are right. The DC motor just you plug it in, red goes to red, black goes to black. You plug it in, hey, it works, yay! But it doesn't go the other direction. What's wrong with it? It doesn't. Well, how would you tell it? They are under too much panic right now to be curious about how a DC system works, how an electric motor would work, and so
Yeah.
forth. And so I showed them with I brought the power supply in and plugged it in. I said, look, it turns. It's fine. You guys are going to. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to write about the really cool electric design that you would come up with if you had another 6 months to work on this. Because you are not going to build this electric design between now and when Symposium happens.
Yeah.
That's the problem that you have attracted to yourself. You can't make the thing that you want to in the time that you have remaining. This is my come to Jesus talk, which I have it with somebody every year.
Yes, of course.
You're just not going to be making the thing that you think. And so that's kind of like, wow, I have this major achievement with my electrical majors, and my mechanical majors are kind of floundering. They had the entire year to come talk to me about it. But they understood that what they were doing wasn't burdened by all these details about the electrical part of it. And then at the very end, they go, well, how are we going to make this thing articulate? We want it to move around.
Yeah. I mean, so that's the funny thing. When I'm doing work and there's a portion of it I don't understand, I can understand front loading the stuff I know, but
Yeah.
I move with purpose on the stuff I know. It's like, well, I better go through it quick. And it's usually, it's two approaches. I think I err on the side of going for the stuff I don't understand, taking a look at it at least to kind of see what's going on, bouncing over to see what I do understand, get some more context essentially, but speeding through the work that I think I can do fast because I know, or bouncing back and then going, okay, here's the time sink because I don't know what this is. I don't know what's happening. I'm completely confused. Let me figure this out. And this happens, I'd say, every week, probably. I'm faced with this.
There's no version of this work that's not some type of oscillating between a thing that you are familiar with and can work with, and a thing that's completely it's a black box.
Every week there's new stuff to learn, and I'm completely befuddled. At the beginning of the week, by the middle of it, I might have a little bit of understanding, and by the end of it, I'm like, all right, I think I've got this down. And then next week, a new challenge arises that starts the whole process over again in a completely different area. Yeah, just having to feel a little bit uncomfortable. I don't know. I think it's good. Well, I'm glad that you and your students have been having a fun climax to the year, I would say. The denouement's almost there. Yeah, and I've been writing articles. That's what I've been doing, like a busy beaver every day. I forgot to journal this year since January. I had journal entries or whatever writing, and then I was like 4 days ago, I was like, I'm going to write something, like just a journal. Next thing I know, it was just an article, and here we are.
I've read a couple of your articles. I haven't read the third one. I think you sent me one today that I haven't had a chance to look at yet. I was
That's the fourth.
or excuse me, correction, the fourth one that you sent today.
Yeah.
I was doing, well, I always turn things like this into um, something I enjoy as opposed to it being horrendous. But I'm renegotiating my contract with my landlords, and they want to come out and look at the house and, you know, do a walkthrough. And so, I didn't lay out the charcuterie plate this time. I didn't have time to prepare as much. I was doing a whole bunch of other things, but
Okay.
I like to make it like, oh, like I've invited them over to hang out with
Oh,
me.
yes. Welcome, guests, to my lovely abode.
Totally. And we I was a little bit too chatty this time. We were our recording time was kind of loosely set around the afternoon, and I hadn't let these folks actually inspect the house after them being here for 2 hours. So
Got them right where you want them. They'll just walk through. Well, looks good. You're great. All right. Bye.
yeah, so I yeah, I had that going on today. I hadn't seen what you had sent me today. Uh,
I,
this
I
is not the forum where I think I should give you a bunch of feedback and commentary on it, but I
that
do want to, as I said, we had a text exchange, and since the two people that had the text exchange are here, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Which is, I said, keep this up, keep doing this.
yeah.
It's not a matter of whether I think it's the world's greatest writing or not. It's not that someone else is going to adjudicate that. What I'm saying is that it can take hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of words that you write down, that where you work out your ideas and thoughts about these really complex issues, so that when you are put in the position to let's say, for example, it's a leadership position, not because you were elected into office, but because you're asked to actually come up with policy. For some reason or another, someone says, Pierce, we need you to come up with a policy for this. Then you've already spent the time inventing that policy in your writing,
Yeah.
right? You've already spent the time articulating these ideas and what the problem statement is and what the solution might be, or the solutions plural. And
Yeah.
that's the reason why I want to encourage you to really keep at this.
Yeah.
And
Thanks.
you lay out for the audience, Pierce lays out kind of like a day in the life of Pearson.
Yeah, so all the articles are on my Substack, which will be in the description if anybody wants to take a gander. Please subscribe, like, share, blah blah blah, all that stuff there plugged. But yeah, so far like I said, I took to the initial start. I was like, I just write what I feel like writing about, kind of thing, which is like that's a journal entry usually. But then it kind of metastasized into something else. I was like, oh no, I'm saying something and not to myself, or maybe I am saying it to myself, but I'm going to produce this. And then the second one I started, I've been reading George Orwell. So that first off, that's my first problem. I'm reading 1984 right now. And then I'm reading Peter Turchin's End Times. Now, one of these is based in a historical study that using, mathematical patterning called cliodynamics, which is the theory that Peter Turchin puts forward. So it's based in reality. And then the other one is 1984 by George Orwell, which is technically fiction, but eerily familiar, and it's referenced all the time. And I felt with Orwell, it's been referenced so much when predicting parts of the future or looking at different countries, like Russia or whatever, the Chinese Communist Party right now, or America right now actually, and its increased attack on freedom of speech and other institutions we hold sacred. I thought, man, it would be great if I read the story so that I, could get the full gist of everyone using it as a reference, because I got that it was apocalyptic. I understood it was highlighting kind of a communist authoritarian regime in a way, right? But mixed with
Yeah.
fascism and all the other forms of authoritarian control. And for the readers who haven't yet, I highly recommend the book. It's beautifully written. I have to say it's probably one of the best books I've ever read, actually.
Hmm.
As far as fiction goes, yeah, it's just phenomenal. And the main character also he writes. I mean, that's part of how his rebellion really starts. And
Hmm.
so I suppose that was inspirational in a way. Um, uh, and I felt like, I just felt like writing. So like the first one is kind of about American naivety is the
Hmm.
subject. The second one is how do you activist while being busy in your life, like being a
Yep.
parent and like just a day in the life of Pierce and like what my feelings are about that. The third one is about understanding what archetype I am and the
Hmm.
dangers of my archetype, which is a romantic. Like I romanticize. About an idealistic future and hope
Hmm.
on a grandiose scale. I do think that
Hmm.
way, and those people always are killed in a revolution. Just always. It's so understanding and then I talk about the difference between me and my wife because she's the opposite of that. She's pragmatic, she's shrewd, she's cunning, she understands that um, being that way is foolish if you want to preserve your life. And then I discuss in that one kind of like what will happen if that ever happens to your sons. Like, how do they perceive that? And things like that.
Right.
And then the fourth book we've discussed offline, which is the elephant in the closet. I wrote that article, and
Yeah.
it's probably one of my better written articles. I feel very like there's 4 or 5 parts that have gone unread. Like when I was writing it, I was like, oh, there's so much more to say here. Um,
Yep.
but I lay out the idea that I was reading through part of Orwell. I'm in like part 2 in the middle of the book, I would say. He's in the throes of his love affair and has seriously started to rebel in a way. Spoiler alert. And he's discussing the idea of sexual repression being used as pretty much one of the most ultimate weapons of control
Hmm.
um, by authoritarian states and how powerful it was and redirecting that energy into fascism, into a fanaticism for the state, right? And it's a weapon to be used and utilizing young men who have pent up sexuality. And so that kind of inspired me to talk about the dangers of the self-hating closeted gay man within the MAGA movement and the
Yeah.
conservative movement at large, and how destructive and dangerous of a force this is. And this was my hardest article to write because I wanted to weave between, like I wanted to make it clear that this isn't about homophobia whatsoever. This has nothing to do about homosexuals at large. It's talking about a specific subset of the gay population. Most likely, they're married to women. They have children. Many of these
Yeah.
men, but I am talking specifically about closeted gay mega men, megas. Chiefly, I would say JD Vance would be at the top of that list now because he's the closest to the epicenter of power. But Josh Hawley, Lindsey Graham, and every other one who was on Grindr in the Republican National Convention. Peter Thiel has groomed JD Vance. But this kind of tackles more of the alpha male culture and how it
Hmm.
intersects with this.
Yeah.
I discussed Andrew Tate and how most likely he's definitely gay. And many of these alpha male influencers are gay. Yeah, so I kind of talk about this and this projection of hatred towards women and homosexuals who are out and proud because they hate and envy. There's a hatred. There's a hatred of the freedom that they have, and it's a rebuke on the life that they feel they can't live, and it elicits a hatred to do ultimate harm and destroy those people. That's kind of where I go with it. So, light subject material.
That is, to the extent that I can just reply and say, wow, that is a very complex blend of issues and cultural norms and family traumas that's baked into an idea that when you bring it up, the knee-jerk response from a progressive person would be to attack you for saying negative things about gay people. That's not what you're doing. And the knee-jerk response from a conservative person is to say, well, there's no such thing as a conservative gay person. Right? They can't be in our coalition doesn't tolerate that because we want them on the outside. I said conservative. You know what's a big mistake to make these days is to confuse conservatism with the Make America Great Again movement.
Yeah, I say MAGA. They're
actually separate things.
MAGA. Yeah, I if I say conservative and I mean a MAGA conservative, I say MAGA conservative because I think there's definitely that Venn diagram overlaps. But I when I think you mean like the classical neoconservative or the old school John McCain conservative, we could say he's a good iconic figure.
John McCain's attitude and approach to I'm putting ideas in his head as a John McCain's no longer with us. He can't defend himself. But
shout out to Memorial Day, though. He can get a happy Memorial Day. There we go.
Happy Memorial Day to John McCain. So I'm not trying to make a story that didn't happen, but John McCain's attitude towards a lot of social issues was, the government does need to legislate on this. This is not what we should be putting our time into. There are much bigger problems to solve here before we try to not prevent these people from getting married or prevent these people from having this resource or attribute that everyone else has access to. Yeah, he was much more interested in solving those big problems and giving people greater freedom within the civilization that he loved and represented and worked for. Easy for me to say, he's not with us right now. He can't defend himself. Maybe he would say, no, you're wrong about all that, Richard. I would never, absolutely.
Yeah. So, it was an interesting place to go. I think there's more, I barely bring up the trans thing. It's kind of a last minute thought where I discuss, there's like 0.0009% of our country is trans, which is essentially a rounding error, and yet it occupies at least 50% of the MAGA's brain holes.
Right.
And I kind of leave it at that, but there's a whole article to be had there because I think this probably has some Freudian implications here, about this sexual attraction and the confusion it causes in MAGA men and the hatred of that confusion that, that's a confusing thing that upsets them, and it's not normative, and therefore it's alienating and confusing. And I think there's probably a lot to explore there. But I have no doubt if we looked at some of these guys' porn history, it would be rife with some of this material. And that might be. And another article would be why the conservatives and the MAGA are so keen on banning porn. It's the idea of like, well, if we ban it, it won't be there. And if you want to militarize the youth, you need to up the sexual repression, right? So there's probably 3 or 4 other articles in the sphere of this topic that I'll explore at some point. So
I was having a spirited conversation with another vet recently, and I would say he hews in the usage of the word hew to mean cleave or to cut. He cuts towards the "Make America Great Again" movement more
color me
so
shocked.
than I would prefer my friends to enlist in that. We were talking about the demographics, and because he's a Christian man, he's got it all solved. He's got it all figured out, and
Yes.
that's
Simple
that's
answers to complex problems.
sorry, Christian folks, but I'm calling you out on this. There is a tendency in faith based lives to look at a problem, see it for a black and white problem, and have a black and white solution for it. And it turns out
Or just a
it's
white
not that
solution.
easy. Yeah, exactly a white solution. See what you did there. We were talking about this, and he says, "Well, look at the Japanese. Look at their civilization is shrinking. Their demographics are in decline. And you know what it's all attributed to? Pornography."
Mm.
And I said, "I'm going to stop you right there, buddy." Because you know what would be great, Pearson? Wouldn't it be amazing if the ills of our civilization is defined by the Christian right were the actual problem? Would that be amazing? Because then there's a solution to it. It's a simple solution.
Yeah.
You just ban everything.
Yeah.
You know what worked really great when we banned the sale and transfer of alcoholic beverages? It worked wonderfully. We even, for those of you who know better, the 18th and 21st Amendment are related in a very peculiar way. The 18th Amendment is where we banned alcohol,
Yeah.
and the 21st was, can you name it? We repealed the ban.
that shit. Hey, this is so funny that you got into a conversation. I got into an argument or heated, spirited discussion.
Yeah, spirited.
With a self-proclaimed communist who thought that we should ban all junk food because it's so unhealthy for our population.
Right.
And I had to argue with them like, first off, good luck getting that shit passed.
Yeah.
It's better. Like, don't you think it would be easier to convince the population to increase the funding in education maybe? And then therefore we could just teach people to make better decisions about, what food they eat, and they could limit the junk food, but they still have the freedom to get the junk food whenever they want, like, anyways, that's so funny. We had a argument with two people that on the horseshoe of ideology were probably almost they couldn't be far apart, but they're coming back around to touching your tips when it comes to banning and stopping freedoms. It's crazy. Like, oh, well, we want freedom and the same for everything for everyone on this side. Communism, the social, everyone is treated exactly the same and equal and all that stuff. So we ban a bunch of shit. And then we got I want the ultimate freedom to say and do whatever I want unless it's not what I want to say. Then we ban all the shit that I don't like and agree with. Yeah. So that doesn't count as freedom of speech because we banned it all. Like, you can't say Palestine now for reasons. But that's not banning freedom of speech. You're just a fucking Zionist, and that's a crime now. You're an anti-Semite for saying, Palestine should be free now. Within the U.S., that's a crime now. That's an infliction on our freedom of speech, of which I just broke the law. My bad.
There's a list of banned words that's circulating on the internet now, and if you take an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, you can fill it with the banned words. It's single spaced. I think it's like 5 or 6 columns. And it's probably that version of it that I saw was probably not the official list, but it is the list of words that someone has compiled that were trigger words in otherwise discourse and discussions. And my favorite part about it is that it's not just that the word Palestine is on the sheet. It is.
As a trigger word?
It's that the words for male and female, man and woman, and a couple of others that are just nouns. Just nouns.
Yeah, it's so funny. They just banned nouns. Yeah.
We can't. So the if you're listening to this broadcast and you haven't read 1984, George Orwell spends not a little bit of time in the book talking about the way that the state affects culture by removing words from the lexicon. Right?
Specifically, one of his friends is a guy who's doing about it. He brags about getting rid of the antecedent to a word, like basically good. He was bragging, well, why do we need the word bad? That's stupid. It should just be good or not good or very good or extreme, and he's like, and eventually we'll get rid of all of those. So then you can just be good to the power of two. I forget how he did it, phrased it. It was stupid, I have to say. But he basically just said there were just different iterations of good, extra good or whatever,
It's part of what makes 1984 such a. That's why it's referred to so much in our discussions about freedoms and our discussions about First Amendment and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of 1984 is the little bit that it draws on the concept of the panopticon, which is the panopticon is, if you haven't heard of this before, it's the scenario where there's a prison and it's designed in such a way that you're always in view of the warden. You're never not being observed. And this civilization that 1984 deals with is one very much like that. You're under surveillance constantly. I have it up here on my internet browser. It says the panopticon.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll tell you about it here in a second. The panopticon is the design of an institutional building with an inbuilt system of control organized by the English philosopher and social theorist Jeremy Bentham. This was done in the 18th century. So Bentham was thinking about this in the 1700s. The concept is to allow all prisoners of an institution to be observed by a single corrections officer without the inmates knowing. And so if you take the idea of the panopticon and blow it up to a civilization, 1984 is the perspective idea of this. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, first off, that's fascinating that somebody invented the idea as a method for looking at prisoners, or I guess he was trying to make the prison as efficient as possible. Basically, you have one guard who's kind of watching the whole situation from a hidden vantage point. I think one of the most fascinating parts of it, and that I think is the reason I wrote the third article about how I would be killed, was the idea of doublethink.
Yeah.
I think doublethink is one of the most interesting concepts that he lays out. This idea of having to consciously make yourself unconscious in ways while you think both ways about something. You think what you want to think, or I guess the truth, your truth of the topic, and then you think about the lie equally until, and then you hypnotize yourself into the lie on purpose, and then try to erase the fact that you hypnotized yourself with your mind. And you're supposed to do this consciously, but subconsciously, so that your face and your heart rate and who you are as a person is as placid as can be.
Yeah.
I think this is the best. This is my best attempt at trying to describe it. I'm probably not doing it justice, but this is the way I'm interpreting it. I thought that was probably one of the most interesting subjects, and it was why I was like, oh, I would not survive, because I'm not a good actor. I have too much conviction in my beliefs, and I feel as though I wouldn't be quiet when I should be quiet, and I would speak up too loudly when I should speak quietly. And I would say the wrong things too many times that I would alert suspicion. all of those things. I had these thoughts while I'm reading this. I was like putting myself in this perspective. I think, yeah, there's just these moments that stand out to me, and that to me was really powerful. So, the
There's a
idea
lot
and
to be said
concept.
about 1984. For those who are unfamiliar, when George Orwell wrote the book, it was in the 1940s. In fact, 84 is just transposing the 4 and the 8 from 1948 when he was uh, it was either the year that he was writing it or the year it was published. So he just
It was
how
published
do
in
we take
'49. Yeah.
yeah, so how do we take the our current time and make it far enough into the future that we could imagine a trajectory that starts now to finish at this, and 84 worked pretty well.
Hmm.
He was off by a couple of decades because there were a couple of things that weren't ready yet to really be leveraged into this self-policing panopticon concept that he was formulating.
Well,
It,
FDR,
it's
Truman, and the U.S. kind of changed the game after World War II and set capitalism back from where we've seen it start to want to go right
right.
now, right? This financialization of the market,
Hmm.
this worsening of everything. Just the
Hmm.
quality of stuff is worse and all this stuff. You look at 1984 and he discusses just everything is broken and nothing is fixed and everything is
Hmm.
just dilapidated. And all that exists is the party structures, which are, you know, metallic and ugly and agnostic of any design decisions or whatsoever. We could go on forever on this, but I see we've hit the witching hour of 1 hour and a minute.
It's true.
Um,
These are important ideas. We're not the first people to rehash 1984 in our little book club here. I listened to the audiobook of it a couple of years ago, and can't really speak. I can't be contemporaneous with you on it. You're actually experiencing it now, and it's in my memory.
yeah,
But uh, as a final thing to say on this is that um, in the unhinged horror of our nation becoming an authoritarian state, it's actually easier to get there than we would have ever imagined it to be. It's easier to arrive there with fewer steps than we would think, or with even less violence than you might expect. And that's the danger that we live in right this moment. We started this conversation today with me talking about the dismal prospects for careers for the people who are graduating from college this year.
yeah,
Last year, they would have thought that they were stepping out into um, a scenario of a workforce where their labor was going to be highly valued and really necessary for any number of the projects that the Inflation Reduction Act was meant to solve. And I don't see how there's continuity with that with this group of people graduating now.
yeah,
So when we talk about these simple, shortened steps to authoritarianism, be weary of things like this. Be wary of things that are manufactured crises, which this one is. This is not an accident of people playing fast and loose with the financial rules. This is manufactured.
yes. A
And
crisis you make so you can fix it, and then
precisely.
and call victory, and lie to your face, and normalize the lie so that enough of you accept it and start to feel crazy if you don't accept it. So your peer group will pressure you into it. One
And
thing,
remember that
yeah,
and remember that small group of people that's a rounding error in our population will remind you to be really scared of them
yeah.
over and over again.
So I think the big takeaway, and I'm not even halfway through the book yet, and I expect tragedy. Trust me, because I'm in the love story that is well written. I love it, and I just all my I'm pushing 40. I've heard enough good stories to know that fuck, dude, if a revolution is occurring, tragedy be happening. So, but one of the things that my optimist spirit picked up on was the fact that he finds out other people are rebelling. And when he takes small acts of rebellion, he's rewarded by becoming aware that other people are also rebelling, whether that's his love interest who rebels individually and cynically because she is a product of the system, she's young, and whether it's the other guy like O'Brien or whatever. And in doing so, it emboldens other people to rebel. And that's why I think it's fine to write. Like, I think if people, it's good. I got a comment back already from a random stranger which was really nice. Maybe I'll just read that as our closing thing. So here he goes. They said, "This is a great read. I commiserated along with your thoughts and concerns, but also gained a couple of new perspectives and dot connections I hadn't even connected the dots to yet." And I don't care about the connecting the dots part. I just like that I commiserated along with your thoughts, right? And then sometimes feeling like you're not crazy and other people are thinking these things, and just knowing that that's happening, that's enough to like start feeling a way, right? So anyways.
Good show, man.
All right, man. Hey, it's been a pleasure. I can't wait to do this again. I'll catch you later on the next one.
All right. I'll see you before the next holiday.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.